A Senate Democrat just made an insane demand: fire Stephen Miller, or no deal on government funding. This isn't a negotiation. This is a hostage situation. And what happened in Minneapolis that triggered this? Two people are dead, the White House is scrambling, and even Republicans are calling for heads to roll. This is getting wild. Stay with me. Hi, everyone. Marcus Reed here with Senate Decoded, where I break down Senate politics in plain English. No partisan spin, just the facts and what they mean for you. Right now, we're facing a potential government shutdown, but this isn't your typical budget fight. This time, a Democrat senator just drew a line in the sand that nobody saw coming. He's demanding that President Trump fire one of his top advisors, Stephen Miller, or he won't vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security. And here's the thing, this isn't just one rogue senator. This is part of a massive revolt happening in the Senate right now over what happened in Minneapolis. Two people are dead after immigration raids, and the fallout is tearing through Capitol Hill like a wildfire. I'm going to break down exactly what happened, who's demanding what, why this matters, and what's probably going to happen next. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the basics because this situation is complicated and the media is spinning it in 100 different directions. First, you've got Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat from Arizona. He just won his seat a few months ago, so he's brand new to the Senate, and he's already making waves. Second, you've got Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor to President Trump. If you know Trump's immigration policy, you know Stephen Miller. He's the architect behind most of it. Third, you've got Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security. She oversees ICE, Border Patrol, TSA, FEMA, basically the entire department that handles immigration enforcement. Here are the facts. During immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis, two people were shot and killed: Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy. Now, the details are still coming out, but what we know is this was during an ICE operation, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. These operations happen all the time across the country. ICE goes into communities, they have warrants, they're looking for people who are in the country illegally, especially those with criminal records. But this time, something went wrong. Two civilians ended up dead. After Alex Preddy was killed, Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem did something that exploded this whole situation. They labeled him a domestic terrorist. Let me repeat that. A civilian was shot during an immigration operation, and the White House called him a domestic terrorist. That statement went straight to President Trump, and now we're dealing with the consequences. Because whether or not Preddy was a threat, and we don't have all the facts yet, calling a dead civilian a terrorist without a full investigation is politically radioactive. Democrats in the Senate are furious. And it's not just Democrats, some Republicans are too. So now we get to Senator Ruben Gallego's demand. And this is where it gets really interesting. The Senate is trying to pass a funding bill to keep the government open. Part of that bill funds the Department of Homeland Security, the agency that runs ICE, Border Patrol, TSA, all of it. Senate Democrats have the power to block this funding bill. They don't have the votes to pass their own version, but they have enough votes to stop the Republican version from passing. This is how Senate negotiations work. Most Democrats are asking for reforms, restrictions, guardrails on DHS. They want oversight. They want accountability measures. That's standard negotiation stuff. But Ruben Gallego, he just went nuclear. Here's what he said on X, and I'm quoting directly: "We all know who's really running things in this White House. Stephen Miller is the brains behind the most unhinged and depraved policies we've seen in generations. Americans are tired of his insane extremist vision for this country. It's time for him to go. Trump needs to fire him. Now. No funding DHS with that creep calling the shots." Let me break down what just happened here. First, Gallego is saying Stephen Miller, not Trump, not Noem, is the real power behind immigration policy. He's saying Miller is running the show. Second, he's calling Miller's policies unhinged and depraved. Those aren't negotiating words. Those are fighting words. Third, and this is the big one, he's making his vote conditional on Trump firing Stephen Miller, not reforming policy, not adding oversight. He wants a person gone. Fourth, he called him a creep. That's personal. That's not about policy anymore. That's about the man himself. This is not how Senate negotiations typically work. You don't demand the president fire his advisors as a condition for your vote. That's not your jurisdiction. That's not your power. That's a separation of powers issue. But Gallego just did it anyway. Now, I want you to understand why this is such a big deal, because this isn't normal politics. The Senate has the power to confirm cabinet members like Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security. They vote yes or no on whether she gets the job. That's their constitutional role. But Stephen Miller, he's not a cabinet member. He's White House staff. The Senate never confirmed him. He doesn't answer to them. He answers directly to the president. So when Gallego demands Trump fire Miller, he's demanding the president remove someone from his own White House staff, someone the Senate has no constitutional authority over. Now you might say, so what? Gallego can demand whatever he wants. And you're right, he can. but Trump has zero obligation to comply. And historically, presidents do not let Congress dictate who works in their White House. Can you imagine if Republicans demanded Obama fire Valerie Jarrett, or if Democrats demanded Bush fire Karl Rove? It would be a massive constitutional overstep. Even if we put the constitutional questions aside, let's talk about whether this demand even makes sense strategically. If you're Ruben Gallego and your goal is to reform DHS policy, why are you focused on one person? Firing Stephen Miller doesn't automatically change immigration policy. Trump would just replace him with someone else who shares his views. If you want policy change, you negotiate for policy change. Specific restrictions, oversight mechanisms, budget limitations. You don't demand personnel decisions. Unless, and this is what I think is really going on, Gallego isn't actually trying to win this negotiation. He's trying to make a statement. He's trying to position himself as the Democrat who stood up to Trump and demanded accountability. And that might work for him politically in Arizona. His voters might love it, but it doesn't solve the actual problem. Here's what's going to happen. Trump is not going to fire Stephen Miller, not a chance. Not even a 0.1% chance. Why? Because if Trump caves to this demand, he looks weak. Every senator would start making demands about White House staff. It would set a precedent that would haunt him for the rest of his presidency. Plus, Stephen Miller is one of Trump's longest-serving and most trusted advisors. They've worked together since 2016. Trump is loyal to people who are loyal to him. He's not firing Miller because a freshman senator told him to. So Gallego's ultimatum is dead on arrival, which means either option A, Gallego backs down and votes for the funding bill anyway. Option B, Gallego votes no, the bill fails, and we get a partial government shutdown. Option C, other Democrats negotiate a deal that Gallego can accept without requiring Miller's firing. My money is on option C. But here's where this gets even more complicated, because it's not just Democrats who are furious right now. Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina said Kristi Noem needs to go. Quote, 100% she needs to go. He called the handling of the Minneapolis situation amateur hour at its finest. He specifically criticized both Noem and Stephen Miller for calling Alex Priddy a domestic terrorist and then relaying that message to Trump without proper verification. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, who actually voted to confirm Noem as DHS secretary, now says she wouldn't support her again. She said Trump needs to re-examine who he has in place as the Secretary of Homeland Security and that it's probably time for her to step down. So let's be clear about what's happening here. Democrats want Miller fired. Some Republicans want Noem fired. And House Democrats are even talking about impeaching Noem. This isn't partisan unity against Trump. This is a genuine crisis of confidence in the leadership of the Department of Homeland Security. Tillis and Murkowski are calling for Noem to resign or be fired. That's within Trump's authority, and it's politically feasible. The secretary serves at the pleasure of the president. Trump could fire her tomorrow if he wanted to. But firing Stephen Miller, that's different. That's the president's inner circle. That's his White House staff. That's his advisor. And Republicans in the Senate, even those critical of Miller, are not joining Gallego's demand that Trump fire him. Why? Because even Republicans who dislike Miller understand that setting the precedent of the Senate dictating White House personnel is dangerous. Today, it's Stephen Miller. Tomorrow, it could be their preferred president's advisors. So while some Republicans want Noem out, they're not supporting Gallego's ultimatum on Miller. All right, let's talk about what happens next, because this is moving fast. The government funding deadline is coming up. If the Senate doesn't pass a DHS funding bill, we're looking at a partial shutdown. That means TSA agents at airports still work, but they don't get paid. FEMA disaster relief slows down Border Patrol agents still work, but they don't get paid. Coast Guard operations continue, but without pay. Ironically, ICE enforcement, the very thing Democrats want to restrict, would continue during a shutdown because it's considered essential. So a shutdown over DHS funding doesn't actually stop immigration enforcement. It just hurts all the other functions of the department. Right now, Senate Democrats are working on a package of reforms they want attached to the DHS funding bill. Things like enhanced oversight mechanisms, restrictions on certain types of operations, reporting requirements, accountability measures for use of force. These are policy demands, things that can actually be negotiated. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, is trying to unify his caucus around these reforms. Gallego's demand that Trump fire Miller, that's not going to be part of any deal. It can't be. Trump won't agree to it, and Republicans won't support it. So most likely we're going to see Democrats get some policy concessions in exchange for their votes to fund DHS. They'll claim victory by pointing to the reforms they secured. Gallego will probably vote yes once he gets those reforms, even though Miller will still have his job. And Trump will be able to say he didn't cave to the demand to fire his advisor. But the real story here isn't just about this one funding bill. It's about the growing tension between the White House and even some Republicans over how immigration enforcement is being handled. The Minneapolis shootings exposed serious questions. Are immigration operations being conducted safely? Is there proper oversight? Who's accountable when things go wrong? Should the White House be labeling dead civilians as terrorists before investigations are complete? These questions aren't going away, even after this funding fight is resolved. So let me bring this all home. Senator Ruben Gallego demanded that President Trump fire Stephen Miller as a condition for his vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security. This demand came after 2 people were killed during immigration operations in Minneapolis, and after Miller and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem labeled one of them a domestic terrorist. First, this is an unprecedented demand. Senators don't typically condition their votes on the president firing White House advisors. That's a constitutional overstep. Second, it's not going to work. Trump is not firing Miller. Not for Gallego, not for anyone. It sets a bad precedent and shows weakness. Third, Democrats will probably get some reforms in exchange for their votes, but not the personnel changes Gallego demanded. Fourth, even some Republicans want accountability. Specifically, they want Noem out, but they're not supporting the demand to fire Miller. Fifth, this whole situation shows that Trump's immigration policy is facing pushback not just from Democrats, but from within his own party. The Minneapolis shootings exposed real problems with how immigration enforcement is being conducted and how the White House is communicating about it, and those problems are going to continue to cause political headaches for Trump, regardless of whether this funding bill passes. So what do you think? Should Trump fire Stephen Miller? Should Kristi Noem resign? Or are Democrats overreacting to a tragedy and trying to score political points? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more analysis like this, breaking down Senate politics without the partisan spin, hit that subscribe button. I'm posting videos every single day covering what's really happening in Washington. This is Marcus Reed with Senate Decoded. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. 2 people are dead after immigration raids, and the fallout is tearing through Capitol Hill like a wildfire. I'm going to break down exactly what happened, who's demanding what, why this matters, and what's probably going to happen next. Let's get into it.